This bike weighs over 10 kilos, but this bike weighs less than 7. What's actually the difference? Let's talk about it. Hey guys, it's Lewis from Recycle Bicycle Sales here. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the theoretical and the practical differences between a lightweight and a heavy road bike. So make sure you stick along until later in this video when we take them both for a test ride outside as well. First of all, what are we actually looking at here? Well, on my right, on your left, we've got a Reed Falco. It's an aluminium frame, aluminium wheels, rim brake. I don't think it has any carbon fiber on it. It's a really good entry-level bike for someone to get into cycling. But then on my left and on your right, we've got a Cannondale Super 6. This one is a carbon fiber frame, carbon fiber wheels, tubular wheels as well, and pretty much everything that can be carbon fiber is carbon fiber. This is a much more higher end bike. Let's talk about what the difference is. So the first difference between these two bikes is pretty obviously the weight. This one is about 10.3 kilos and this one is about 6.8 kilos, which is right on the UCI legal race limit. That's about a 3.5 kilo difference. Now I know that 3.5 kilos might not sound like a whole lot if we're talking about things, but if we're talking about cycling, and if you're a cyclist, you know that 100 grams can make a difference. So if we're talking about 3.5 kilos, that can be quite a big difference with cycling. So let's talk about how that's actually going to feel on these two bikes. First thing I want to try and make clear is, what do we consider a light bike and a heavy bike? What's sort of the numbers that we're talking here? I think, in my opinion, a heavy bike is probably anything above sort of 9 kilos or maybe 8.5 kilos. And on the flip side, I think a lightweight bike is pretty much anything under about 7 kilos. It's worth noting here as well that if they're racing in the UCI level racing, you know, your Tour de France and all this sort of stuff, you've got a weight limit. You're not allowed to race a bike any lighter than 6.8 kilos. So that's considered too light for racing. So that's a pretty damn lightweight bike. Let's talk about riding feel for the moment. I think the most notable difference that you'll find is when you're going up into the hills. These lighter weight bikes, because they are lighter, will go up the hill a little bit faster because you don't have to fight against gravity quite as much. So if you're spending a lot of time up in the hills, you might appreciate a nice lightweight road bike. Whereas if you're riding on the flat, what we'll find is that the weight difference isn't a massive factor. However, it will also change the acceleration and the braking and the cornering. As in, it's easier to speed up when you're leaving a traffic light, for example. It's easier to slow down when you're coming up to a traffic light, or if you're going around a corner, you don't have to sort of fight against that inertia quite as much. This isn't me saying that the heavy bikes are bad, but I'm saying if you upgrade to a lightweight road bike, they are better. Let's keep talking about the hills for a moment. If you're riding a lightweight bike, it will be a little bit easier and faster to get up the hill, because when you have one of these sort of heavier bikes, you've got to fight against gravity a little bit more. When you're going up the hill, the bike is heavier, so you've got to lug more weight up the hill. We all know that riding up hills is already difficult, so having a heavy bike makes it a little bit more difficult again. However, if we are riding one of these heavier bikes up the hill, what you might find is when you're coming back down the hill, they're a little bit more stable. If you're going over some bumps and some cracks in the road, or there's some tree roots under the track or something like that, as you're riding along, these slightly heavier bikes will hold their line a little bit better. These lightweight road bikes might sort of bounce around a little bit. Not necessarily the end of the world, but it is something worth noting. That's a pro or a positive thing that I would say about these heavier bikes, is that they are more stable and safer to ride. And when you're coming down the hill, because they are a little bit heavier, you've got gravity on your side, they'll help pull you down the hill a little bit faster. So your top speed could even be a little bit higher if the gear ratio lets you keep pedaling. But it's also worth noting that to get to your top speed, it might take a little bit longer because you've got to fight against inertia a little bit more. Also, on that point, as you're coming into a corner, your braking distance might be a little bit longer because you've got a slightly heavier weight to pull up before you go around the corner. So you might want to brake a tiny little bit earlier. So even though these heavier bikes will go with gravity down the hill a little bit faster, at the end of the day, it's also kind of going to come down to the person that's actually riding the bike. If they're a little bit more confident on the way down the hill and they can go around the corner a little bit faster, that's also a variable here as well. It's not just the bike. Now let's move away from the hills and back down to the flat. We're riding along the beach now. These lightweight bikes will speed up and slow down a little bit easier because there's less weight that you have to be able to move. So I suppose, yes, they will work a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, as we're riding along the flat and we're not fighting against gravity going up or down the hill, it's kind of just going to come down to how strong you are on the bike. If you've got a really strong friend next to you and they're on a heavy bike and you're on a lightweight bike, that might not be the only difference between your speeds. Staying on the topic of just riding around, these heavier bikes tend to be able to hold their line a little bit better. By that I mean, if you're riding along and there's some bumps in the road, the lightweight bike might sort of shake around a little bit because it's not quite as compliant as what one of these heavier bikes would be. So they're, I'm almost going to say, safer and easier to ride along as you're just riding around. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to quickly mention that YouTube sent us a message recently saying that 94% of people watching these videos haven't subscribed yet. So I just wanted to quickly say that we have tens of thousands of dollars worth of value in these videos and we're giving it all to you for free. So if it is something that you appreciate and you want to help our small business succeed, I'd love it if you could hit that subscribe button down below. Anyway, let's get back to the video. So now you've finished your ride and you've come back home, and now we want to talk about the durability of each of these bikes. Which one's stronger and which one's going to last longer? Well, I think these aluminium bikes have less that can actually get damaged. If you were maybe parking your bike somewhere and it was to slide and bump into the frame, you might dent it or scratch it. Whereas with carbon fiber, it is a little bit more delicate in that sense. If it had an impact with like a pole or something like that, it really can't handle it very well. So these lightweight bikes are really good when you're riding, but the trade-off in that durability side of things is that they're not quite as strong as a metal frame like these ones here. Aside from durability, let's talk about money for a second. These lightweight bikes tend to be super expensive, whereas the sort of heavier bikes tend to be a little bit better priced. Also, I would say when you buy them brand new and then when you go to sell them secondhand, they lose a bit of value, as everything would. Your car loses a bit of value, your bikes also lose a bit of value. If we're talking in percentages, they're usually quite similar. They both lose an average of maybe 40% from their brand new price. But 40% discount off of a cheaper bike might only be a few $100s, whereas a 40% discount on one of these super lightweight bikes could be thousands of dollars. So you might lose a bit more money on one of these bikes. However, if you came into our bike shop at Recycle Bicycle Sales here in Adelaide, South Australia, these bikes have already had their depreciation. So if you bought them secondhand for whatever price you paid, for example, this one is listed at $1,800, you might use it for a couple of years and then sell it for $1,700, for example. You might not actually lose much money if you bought the bike secondhand in the first place. And also, while I'm mentioning money, this one is $1,800 and this one is only $500. So there is a pretty big difference between these two bikes as well. So I know that we're not comparing apples and apples, but that's the whole idea of this video. We're comparing heavier bikes and lighter weight bikes. But that's enough talking. Let's head outside, take these bikes both for a test ride and see if I can find a difference between the two and try and tell you what I notice. So now you join us outside for a quick field test. We're going to try the lightweight bike and the heavy bike out on the road. We're going to see which one performs better and just simply what's different between the two of them. All right. I can hear the wheels on this one. I can hear them like sliding along, which is pretty cool. Sounds pretty cool, very buzzy. The handlebars feel big. It feels like a large frame. And I can feel all of these bumps under the road. It's so bumpy and not uncomfortable, but it's not comfortable, if that makes sense. The main thing that I was noticing there, to be honest, was the sound. I could hear the tires. I think it was these big deep dish wheels really making a lot of noise. I'm gonna try the other one and then we might come back to it. Now let's try the heavier bike. Oh, it was harder to take off. Maybe it's a different gear. Because this is a cheap bike, the brakes feel bad, but they do, when they bite, they feel more powerful because it's got the aluminium brake instead of the carbon braking track. It feels more like subtle or supple, I suppose. Like all the cracks in the road, it's not vibrating as much. It's a lot quieter. I'm not hearing the tires biting anymore. Steers quite well. Just feels nice. I know that's not a very descriptive word, but it just feels nice. I'm gonna try the other one again now that I can try them back to back. All right. Wow, sorry, just picking that up. That is so much lighter. This is, if I was at the coffee shop with my friends, I'd be showing off how lightweight this is. I'd be lifting it up with one finger. And I'd be like, look at me guys. I spent so much money on a bike. Yeah, it takes off a lot easier, definitely. I can feel the brakes more like bitey. Not necessarily more powerful, but like more instant. This is a very long frame. It feels Feels very like stretched out for me. Just feels very tall. Just feels very tall. I think, to be fair, we're comparing two very different frame sizes, which changes a lot as well. But yeah, this feels more fragile. That's the word I'm going to use. It feels more fragile than the heavier bike. Not better or worse, but just different. Yeah, let's go inside and we'll talk a bit more about it. Well, there we have it. That was a quick test ride outside. As I was saying out there, they both definitely felt good because they feel like bikes, and bikes are always good. This one here, the lighter weight one, felt more fragile. As in, as I was riding along, it felt like if I turned, the bike would just turn really quickly. And if there was a little bump while I was going around the turn, I could feel it bouncing over those bumps. Whereas this one here, the heavier one, was a bit more sort of glued to the floor. If I wanted to steer, it steers perfectly and everything is lovely, but this one just felt like nippier. Like it would change direction a little bit quicker. I'd noticed the bumps on the road a lot more on the lightweight one. I know that the brakes on this one should be more powerful because they're an aluminium braking track and that one's a carbon fiber braking track, but this one felt more bitey, as in when I touched the lever, I could feel it try and slow down very quickly. But if I squeeze hard on these ones, they definitely stop a lot faster. To be fair, this one's an extra large frame size and that's a medium frame size. I usually ride an extra large. That one probably felt quite unusual to me. It felt quite small. I know that this one is significantly more expensive, but I don't think it was necessarily significantly more better as well, which I think is a good thing to hear if you're looking at buying your first sort of heavy road bike, I suppose. But yeah, I enjoyed them both. It's hard to say that one's better than the other, but if I was spending time up in the hills and giving this a real field test, I would probably say that the Cannondale Super 6, the lightweight bike, is probably a better bike. But for just cruising around on a Sunday ride, honestly, they're both quite good. They're both very good bikes. I would still recommend the nice, expensive Cannondale road bike personally. Quick disclaimer, I didn't really bother changing gears between these two bikes because this video is more about comparing a lightweight bike and a heavy bike. Not comparing the gears, not comparing the componentry, just comparing the weight difference and how it feels riding both of these different bikes. With everything that's been said in this video, if you think that you want to save weight on your bike and you want to know some different ways of how you can save weight, I think we've done a couple of videos further back on our YouTube channel about exactly that. So you might appreciate those videos. Go check them out. Otherwise, I'm going to say thanks for watching, click that subscribe button and all that fun stuff, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.